Jen, for such a great introduction, and love being here. Love seeing some familiar faces and some new faces. So like Jen said, I've been here, with her for a number of years and have been a licensed clinical social worker for a while. And these pillars are something I kind of created a while ago to look at what you can control in situations where you feel very out of control. And there, for those of you that have worked with me, just to give you some structure. So when Jen put this together last year, we thought it was really great during the pandemic, and it was so well received, and it looks obviously like it's well received once again with so many people on the call. So I'm thrilled that you're here, and I'm thrilled that I got the opportunity to do the pillar number 5, which is intimacy and social connections, but we kind of refined it tonight for connections and relationships. So I'm going to screen share with you all my slides. Okay, here we go. Slideshow. I'm gonna move this so I can start my slideshow. There we go. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
So the most fun I have to tell you all, are the Google images that I choose to put on these slides. So it's a lot of fun. I feel like I'm an elementary school teacher, and I channel my sisters that were both teachers through this. So hopefully it's keeps your attention and makes it colorful, right? So it takes a village, right? And I love saying this. Jen and I say this all the time. Connection. What is connection, right? We want to define it. A connection is a bond, a link or tie to something or someone. Interlock the two words, emotional connection, and it becomes a bond or tie to someone with whom you share a particular set of emotions. Without a strong emotional connection, it is doomed to frustrate one or both partners and ultimately fail. So I thought that was kind of a really cool definition of connection. I thought it really kind of suited what we were going to talk about tonight. And we all need to be connected. That's one thing we found out through the pandemic, that even those patients, members I work with that are introverts, really need to be connected to somebody or something. It's really important. That's obviously evident during the illness as well, right? When you feel isolated and you really miss people. Also, when I do a lot of the grief and loss work, that is one of our single most predicting factors of how well people do moving through their grief, is if they have some contact and support from somebody, a connection. Traumatic life events, people need connection to get through. And as we age or have life changes, we have to kind of think about, where do we belong and what's our sense of purpose, right? So within this, where do I belong? What part of the village do I belong in? What sense of purpose do I have? So isolation can be paralyzing. I want you to all remember that, if there's one thing you take from this. So who is in your village, right? When you think about your own, sense of community, as I look at it, we define relationship as a continuing and often committed association between two or more people, as in a family relationship, friendship, marriage, partnership, or other interpersonal link, in which the participants have some degree of influence on each other's thoughts, feelings, and actions. So when I thought about this, I usually talk mostly about, family and friends, your caregivers, but I also want to, have you think about these slides in terms of your coworkers, your healthcare team, your community, whether you live in a rural community, a suburban community, or an urban community. And we've been fortunate enough with the pandemic, with all of this technology now, to reach people in all of those types of communities. So thinking about who is in your village, what are their relationships to you, and how are you connected to them? So there are always changes in roles and relationships. It's just part of our ever kind of changing world, right? Cancer will change your life and the lives of the people around you, as we all know. How your family, friends, coworkers, healthcare team, community, and you react may depend on how you all have reacted to stressful times in the past. So if you have, had stressful times in the past and how you or the people in your life have reacted, that doesn't magically change. We wish it would sometimes. We wish that sometimes the way people react might change, magically, but they really don't. So we have to kind of remember that and think about it. Roles changes, restructuring occur within relationships, sometimes due to financial changes in your circumstances, whether it's illness or job changes. Living arrangements may change, as you change and your kids grow up and they move out, or you have to move from one house to maybe an apartment. Job tasks, change. And sometimes one person does things regularly and somebody doesn't, and we have to change that if illness comes into the picture. And then just your daily activities change depending on how debilitated you are, how fatigued you are. So sometimes, that also changes our roles. Some feelings that are shared, about cancer are, there's this tendency to hide or deny if they feel sad. And this goes for both people that are experiencing the cancer as well as those around you, right? Some people just don't want to talk about it. They feel like if I don't talk about it, then it will, go away, or I won't make anybody be sad. Sometimes you're angry. Sometimes you're looking for someone to blame. And sometimes anger comes into play with, feelings about cancer. Sometimes people like to change the subject, right? When talking about cancer, they don't want to listen to you. They don't want to validate your feelings. And that's so important. But they feel like if they do that, then they're going to, cause you to be upset. Some people act mad for no reason. Some people make jokes about cancer. That's how they cope. Some people pretend to be cheerful all the time, right? My glass is always half full. I can't look at any of the negative. I have to be always cheerful. And those of you that know me, I like to live in the gray, because when people are always positive and always negative, that is definitely, I feel like, sometimes a concern. We want to find that balance, because you can't maintain either one of those for long time periods. Avoid talking about cancer or the prognosis or the longevity of the treatment plan or the side effects, and then staying away from you or keeping their visits short. So that's kind of, somehow, these things happen when you go through cancer within a family system. So what do? We focus on what we can control, like we talked about, coming up with the pillars. So characteristics of a supportive village. I have never really thought about this in terms of this pillar when I've gone over that with people, but I really loved doing these slides because it actually helped me kind of compile them all in one area together. Someday, in my free time, I'd love to write a book about these pillars. And this really is a great chapter, I feel like, of ideas that I, kind of came up with. So number one is definitely self-care. You need to identify what are your needs, what's very important to you now, finding your sense of purpose and belonging. What is that new normal, right? A lot of people, when you're looking for that support and that connection with somebody, not only are you, in need of self-care, but those caregivers, the people that take care of you, they all need self-care. Even those of us that take care of you in this way, in this organization, if Jen and I don't take care of ourselves, we really can't take care of you. So everybody within that system that we talked about in the beginning really needs to focus on self-care. Important. People sometimes think it's selfish, but there's a big difference between selfish care and self-care. Good communication, responding and listening to each other's needs, really important as well, right? Sympathy versus empathy. And this is what we're really going to focus on, the differences between sympathy versus empathy. It's something we need to learn. It's part of self-care, is learning how to be empathetic first to yourself and then to others that are around you. Honesty, able to be hopeful, realistic, have difficult decisions. So to be able to talk about the logistics of, your concerns and your fears and your worries, and to be able to discuss, how do I feel about those things? Really important to be able to share with one another. Honesty is really, a focus that you all should think about in your own lives, as far as with your family and your family with you. So when we're honest, that is being what? Very vulnerable, right? So vulnerability is very important as well, to be able to share your thoughts and feelings with one another, to feel safe in, whatever that relationship is, whether it's your doctor, when some people call me up and they have all these worries about their, they have these side effects and symptoms. And I'll say to them, have you reached out to your doctor? Have you talked to the doctor? Have you talked to your family? Well, I'm not quite sure. I always encourage you to be vulnerable and to share your thoughts and feelings with, your healthcare team and with your loved ones. And then that way, hopefully they will feel comfortable to share their thoughts and feelings with you. Grace and forgiveness. So grace is my word for 2022. My word for 2021 was gratitude, right? We all really needed to focus on what are we grateful for in these last crazy 2 years of the pandemic, right? What are you grateful for through your cancer journeys? And so this year is all about grace because, I think all of us at some point have just kind of been fed up with everything, whether it's your illness or it is the pandemic or family, frustrations, friends, job stress. We have to really start looking at ourselves as humans and that no one is perfect. And grace is something to really think about on a daily basis. Do you give yourself grace? Are you able to forgive yourself when you make a mistake or say something or do something? So that is really, something to focus on, that you're not perfect and no one else around you is. The other one, I just added this today, kindness, right? So that kind of is like a no-brainer, like certainly Wendy, Supportive Village would show kindness. But I just read a really interesting article in a Good Housekeeping magazine. It's not a scientific journal. However, I actually intend to do, I'm going to try to put together out of this article. It's just fabulous. A program for my general group coming up in the next couple of months on kindness, because they actually have scientific research out now that it really does produce good endorphins, which makes you physically and emotionally feel better. So volunteering, right? When you can't go back to work, but yet where do I belong? What's my sense of purpose? People that actually volunteer actually produce, those positive endorphins that we all need to actually help us to feel better, to feel well, and to be able to find the joy, that we all want for everybody. So kindness is important. And then lastly, courage, acceptance, hope, and joy. I always go over this. I have a whole presentation. I discuss the courage, acceptance, hope, and joy. It's that ability to look at the positives despite those coexisting negatives in your life, right? And hopefully that is to be able to lead to resiliency and hope. So the courage to be able to face, what you have been told. The acceptance, not accepting the cancer, right? I would never, ever say to somebody, well, you have to accept this cancer, right? That they would probably kick me, off the screen or out of their room. But it would be about accepting, this is where I am in my life right now. So how do I make the best of it? What do I do? How do I turn that corner and pivot to be able to, find some joy, find some hope? And so those things are important as part of your supportive village. Healthy relationships and connections. So these are the 3 things I always ask families to do regularly. It just makes sense, right? These are kind of go on to the kindness thing. And this goes once again also for your medical team, right? They don't love you, but they should care for you. So these 3 things convey a healthy relationship. If you feel that they're taking good care of you, your community, your loved ones, your friends, then you just feel better. You feel connected to them. You feel like they care about you. So loving and caring one another is really important. And that kind of goes into the next one, which is gratitude. Like I had said, last year was kind of focused on gratitude. So sometimes it's just nice to say thank you to people, right? Sometimes it's for the little things, bringing somebody a cup of coffee or, telling somebody, the way you smiled at me today really made me feel good. It made my day. It doesn't have to be anything huge. You don't have to go out and buy them a gift, or do something major for them. Sometimes just a plain thank you is really what everybody needs. And then, of course, when we're human, going back to that human piece, right? I'm not perfect, that grace, saying I'm sorry. And, there's a really great book on forgiveness, and that's put out by Catherine Schwarzenegger Pratt, called The Gift of Forgiveness. It's a nice little book if anybody's looking for something to read about forgiveness. it really talks about the difference between an apology and saying, I'm sorry, because there's a difference. An apology is more sincere. It means I really thought about what happened and I know that I'm not perfect and I take responsibility. Where I'm sorry, it's still a nice thing to say, but there's more of an emotion to it. I apologize. And then, Brene Brown, for those of you that don't know her, we're going to go over her in a minute here. And she writes, grace means that all of your mistakes now serve a purpose instead of serving shame. So I always think that there's so much growth through when we make a mistake and we're able to, process it and give ourselves grace. So those are the three things definitely to think about. I love or care about you. I thank you. And I'm sorry, I apologize, for things that I might have said or done. So here we go into sympathy versus empathy, right? I love this slide, right? You have the sympathy with your brain because we all have this need. We know it's the right thing to do, right? It's the correct thing to feel sympathy. And as somebody once told me when I was discussing them with me, they're like, well, Wendy, Hallmark doesn't have empathy cards. They have sympathy cards. And I said, well, maybe Hallmark needs to have a new line of empathy cards, right? We could come up with that, make a fortune. So when we look at sympathy, right, it's not a bad thing. It's something that we hope everybody feels a sense of in this world, especially now as we just, deal with all of the stress and the pain of the world. But if we just focus on sympathy, we have feelings of pity and sorrow for someone's misfortune. That keeps us, those people feeling like a victim, right? So I know most of you, I would think all of you, if I ask you this question, and if I ask you, would you want sympathy versus empathy? You'd say, well, I don't want any pity, Wendy. That doesn't help me. So those who act out of pity and ignore their own needs, that's kind of what is, people more focused on the sympathy. Empathy, on the other hand, which is the heart, empathy is the ability to understand and share feelings of another. You validate their emotions and their thoughts, and this empowers those individuals to move forward with finding that hope and that joy. So those who act out of compassion and recognize the importance of caring for themselves as well as caring for others are more focused on empathy. So a little bit further looking at this, the balance of sympathy versus empathy. Pity, like we talked about, says, I acknowledge your suffering. Sympathy does say, I care about your suffering. Empathy says, I feel your suffering. And then compassion, which we haven't added yet, which we're adding now, is I want to relieve, not fix your suffering. So remember that it is not our job to fix people. It is our job to be able to use empathy to support them so that we empower them to be able to fix their own issues. So these together are important to be felt by all involved in any relationship. So all of this, empathy and sympathy, can be felt and received through all of those relationships of the people within our village. Empathy under here says, I completely understand the situation, would frustrate me too. Somebody using just sympathy would say, oh, poor you. It makes me feel sad that you're going through this. So there's a difference there. So Brene Brown is the, kind of the guru for empathy right now. And I just put this slide up, it's a lot of words on there, but she is actually a recovering alcoholic. And she is an amazing person. She's written so many books. Jen and I both love her very much. She mainly focuses on courage, vulnerability, shame, and empathy. And she has a lot of great podcasts, a lot of good books to read. So if you're looking for something to really understand empathy even further, she's really a great person. And so I'm going to stop sharing for a second. And there's a video, it's a 2-minute video that she does that really illustrates this. And then we'll talk on the other side of the video. So let's see if I can really do this well. One stop share to this one. Here we go.
So what is empathy and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Okay. Oops. Uh-oh. I've got to stop that again. It's going to start again. I think it's over. Okay, good. All right, we're going to go back to our slides. Okay. So that helped illustrate empathy versus sympathy. And the one thing I want to clarify, though, what I kind of vary on, that Brene basically said her cartoon basically was you hop in the hole, right? So I get nervous when people hop in the hole with somebody, because then I feel like you're both in the hole, right? So I kind of like the thought of, if you're in the hole and you have that person that you love and care about, they're kind of above the hole, and they put that ladder down and they say, hey, here's a ladder. I know it's really dark down there, but I know that you can get up that ladder, and I'm here, and I'm going to cheer you on every step of the way. I'm here to support you, not fix you. We go back to that slide where it said not fixing, right? So I think that it's important to remember when we're, have these connections and relationships, we're there to support one another. And sometimes that means, being more of a cheerleader and a support, rather than getting in that hole and staying in the dark hole with them, if that makes sense. So tools, right? So some tools for tending your relationships and connections. I love this because I think this is something we don't do, especially when we're faced with stress and illness, is we really forget that, everybody needs tending in this, scenario, basically. So how do we do that, right? You actually schedule some time to talk and visit with your loved one, spend time to talk and visit with the people that you care in your life, right? Spend time to talk to the people that take care of you. Let them know what your needs are. It's really important. Sometimes we have to schedule that, because between doctor's appointments and not feeling well, that connection gets lost. It gets lost in work, it gets lost in family. And sometimes we really do have to schedule the time to be able to connect. Establish routines. Routines are so important when it comes to depression and anxiety. Anybody that deals with any severe mental illness, this is the first thing we deal. I ask them, how's your self-care and what's your routine like? And I know 9 times out of 10, the people that really struggle with relationships and connections, are not taking good self-care. They don't have a routine. So we really want to be able to, create a new routine if your old routine doesn't fit you, so that you know what to expect. I love the third one because this is something I grew up doing, right? I don't do it as much now in my own life. I should do it, but eating meals together, there's such a value in sitting down at night and sharing a meal together and, finding out what was your day like, what were the hard things you went through and what things, my mom and dad and I always sat down with my sisters and discussed our day. Really important time for connection. Allowing one-on-one time to do fun activities, right? We have to plan some fun activities. I know that's been extremely hard because we have been isolated, but there are a lot of things you can do that are fun. Early on in the pandemic, I said, get in the car when the weather gets nice and take a drive, go to a park, drive through and get a cup of tea in a Starbucks. Allowing that one-on-one time to have that connection and do a fun activity is really important. Be an active listener. There's that 80-20 rule. You should listen 4 times longer than you speak. That's a hard thing to do for all of us. I'm a talker. I like to talk, but there's such a value to be able to listen. Listening to yourself, asking for clarification on what you're trying to convey or receive. So sometimes, not only, talking, but, allowing that person, asking the question, now, what did you hear me say? Can also help with that, relationship and connection. It slows things down. Speak the truth with honesty and with kindness and respect. So, I think that's hard sometimes for us. We don't want to hurt people's feelings. We don't want to cause any stress. But, being able to speak honestly in a kind way and respectful way really can, open up a channel of communication. It's just beautiful. It's a wonderful thing to see as a therapist whenever, you finally can be in a family session and have people speak their truths about what their needs are. Asking directly for what you want, desire, and need. I had a college professor at IEP once tell me, he said, you should never assume things, right? Because you all know that, right? That word, because it makes, gonna say ASS, you out of you and me, right? And so we always say that, people will say, well, you should have just known what I was thinking. Well, how would I know that? I don't know how you think. And a lot of it is even, how do I communicate? I may be thinking the same thing as you are, but you may communicate totally different than I communicate. So we have to be able to find some common ground, right? Attack the problem and not each other. Really important. We have to look at the facts. What are the facts? Are we coming from this from a personal standpoint of having a personal reaction, feeling like we're personally being attacked? Or is it really just the facts that we need to look at? Staying connected via technology. So this is here to stay. I think we were all going to be connected via technology, even those of us that have kind of been like, oh, I miss people in person. I think this is here to stay. And there's a lot of good things about technology. We always complain about social media, but truly it is a wonderful thing that you can be connected to somebody on the other side of the world this way. I know a lot of families that stay connected that way. So I had an aunt and uncle of my husband's visit us today, and she said, well, we're going to go home because we have a family Zoom every 2 weeks. And I thought, what a great idea. I mean, we were all doing that during the pandemic, but these guys live in all different areas of the country. So being able to have a regular conversation with people that are, away from you is very much valuable. And then maintaining the good relationships like a garden, they need tending. So all of these things you have to be kind of thinking about when you think about the relationship that you have with that particular person. So some words of reflection for meaningful connections, right? Sometimes it takes a serious illness or a loss to make us cherish, appreciate, or celebrate our lives and relationships, but it shouldn't, right? We should be able to look at that and not have these things have to to force us to kind of look at these things. But sometimes that's the silver lining in it, is that, you know, it is time to be able to connect with people because life is short. Amidst darkness, fear, and confusion, there can be moments of exquisite clarity. And I think that is so true. You know, all of you, when you go through these really difficult times, like, you know, it really does bring things to like, what's really important in my life. I do a really great exercise, a value exercise, where I have people divide a paper into thirds. One thing, one side says, you know, these things, you know, these values are important to me. The second column says things that are very important to me. And the third column are things that are not important to me. And it's very interesting to see how that changes as our roles change and our relationships change and we age and illness comes into our lives, because the priorities do shift. And looking at that can really help, you know, designate what is, you know, what is it that I really want in life, you know. Living life fully requires both a renewed sense of appreciation for what is and a sharper vision of what and who are truly important in our life. And so that's something I want you all to remember, that, you know, living a full life, you know, is about where you are right now, what you sense as, you know, your appreciation for as it is, and focusing on what is truly important in your lives and who are truly important. Okay, stop sharing. So now you've all been really great listeners. I'm really glad that you've listened so well. So now it's time for you to ask me questions.